What's up, everyone? Thanks for joining us today for the 1004 show, episode 55. Nick Friedman, College Hunks Hauling, Junk, and Moving. You guys can learn about them at collegehunksfranchise.com. Talk to Nick a lot about the origins of his business 12 years ago, how he won a business plan competition in college and has turned that business that many laughed at into a nationally recognized franchise with 100+ franchises. This is amazing stuff. If you guys are interested in learning more, all you have to do is continue listening. And if you like this, please subscribe, download, share with your friends. Nick Friedman, episode 55, the 1004 show, College Hunks Hauling, Junk, and Moving. Wow, this is a doozy, and this was a great episode. All right, Nick, you guys have been in business for a little over 12 years now. Take us back to, what is that, 2005, 2004? What were you doing then, and what made you really start this?
So it was summer before my senior year of college. I was just trying to look for ways to make some extra money. My buddy from high school approached me, and he had this beat up cargo van that his mom let him borrow. And we said, you know what? Let's call ourselves College Hunks Hauling Junk. We thought it'd be just a catchy way to make the phone ring, put around in mailboxes around town. And that's really when the light bulb went off for me. Is that wow? There's actually something you could make some extra money at, and be fulfilled doing it. So we wrote a business plan our senior year of college. It ended up winning a first prize out of about 150 entries in an entrepreneurship competition. So it gave us a little more confidence in the idea. We graduated from college. We got corporate jobs briefly and said, you know what, let's take our business plan. Let's make it a full-time endeavor. And people were pretty skeptical. They were going to say, you're going to quit your jobs to do what? Haul junk, and the company's going to be called what? College Hunks. You guys are throwing away your college degrees to start, becoming trash men. And when we first started, we kind of used that as motivation. But when we first started, we really were doing all the work ourselves. We're driving the truck, hauling the junk, answering the phones. And people would call the 800 number, which we had routed to our cell phones. They'd call to complain about the erratic driving. And I'd be the one in the driver's seat, answering the phone saying, we don't condone that type of driving in the company. We'll tell those guys to get, to be safer on the road. So we started to burn out a little bit. And one of our mentors recommended to us a book called The E-Myth Revisited by Michael Gerber. And really the key lesson in that book is work on the business, not in the business, create systems so that your business can scale. And so that's really was the next light bulb moment for us. That's how we eventually went on to be able to have a second truck, let alone a second location, let alone eventually franchise. So that's kind of been the evolution of it. But from day one, it was just kind of a gig when we were in college to make some extra money.
Where'd you go to school?
I went to Pomona College. It's a small liberal arts school out in California. I grew up in Washington, D.C. My business partner, who I went to high school with, he went to the University of Miami down in Florida. So we kept coming back to D.C. during summer vacations, which is where we ultimately ended up starting the business.
Where in D.C. are you? Did you grow up?
Upper Northwest, not too far from the Maryland border, kind of the Chevy Chase, Maryland area.
Okay.
But just inside the D.C. border.
I grew up in Northern Virginia. So the Sterling area, Alexandria Hospital. So I know that area very well. I'm actually reading E-Myth right now. It's very interesting. I find it always, intriguing, awesome when you're reading something and you just agree with basically everything that they're saying. You're like, oh, that makes sense. And then you're like, oh, I don't even know how I was thinking like that. So you were in college at Pomona College. Pomona College?
Yes. Yep.
And you were trying to make extra money. The business plan competition, what does that business plan look like to actually, maybe the first few months of actually getting in business? Did it change a lot? Do you still believe in business plans?
So for us, the great thing about the business plan experience was it helped us get all of our ideas out of our head and onto paper so we could actually see it, we could believe it, we could envision it, and then we could start to actually execute it. So it was a very useful exercise for us. Now, a lot of the stuff that we had in the business plan, maybe some of the early projections or some of the actual, strategies or tactics that we had in mind, those didn't ultimately end up unfolding the way we had initially envisioned. But the exercise of documenting how we did things, for me was like, mapping out a playbook on how we were going to try to make the vision into a reality. So it was a great exercise for us. I would encourage anybody that's thinking about getting into a business to at least, document those processes, because then you can refer back to it and use it as sort of a guide for, how you're going to execute, and then you can pivot or adjust as need be once you get into the realities of running the day-to-day of the business.
And I think that's That's really key. Where I think a lot of people think that if you have this business plan, you wrote it, it's going to do very well. The projections are just that, right? I projected my business was going to make $200 million this year. It didn't, so
Yeah.
then my projections are wrong. But then also the strategies behind it. Something that might have worked yesterday doesn't work today.
Hmm.
And I think you probably even see this with some of the Facebook ads that you guys might be running now, where one ad worked perfectly one day. You try and do that exact same thing a few weeks later, and it just doesn't work anymore. And it's crazy to think that you have to continually change that over and over and over again. Um,
Yeah. I was gonna add to that. I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, business, just like life, it's not static, it's not linear. It's undulating, and it's constantly moving. So you have to be somewhat dynamic to be able to adjust to those movements and evolve with with the changing times. And I don't think any entrepreneur, unless they got really lucky, has ever said that they made more money faster than they thought they would getting into it, right? Every entrepreneur expects that they're going to do a lot better, a lot more quickly than they actually do. And so that's also one of the challenges of getting started in business, is to be able to kind of ride out the delay in the successes, or the challenges that hit you early on when you're first getting started.
it's kind of like the musician who is the overnight success, but they're on their seventh album in 15 years as being a musician.
Right. Yeah. No overnight success is overnight. That's true. Unless you win the lottery, maybe.
But you probably played it a lot to get there, right? So you talked about the patience being there. What do you think about surrounding yourself? What type of people were you surrounding yourself with then? And then
Hmm.
once you got into business, did you see that maybe your college friends weren't the same people that you started surrounding yourself with then?
Yeah, I think you hear the saying, you can't soar with the eagles if you're walking with turkeys. I've also heard it said that you become the average of the five people that you hang around with the most. And I heard those pieces of advice early on in my business career, so I did make it a concerted effort to try to surround myself with people that were already successful, that had kind of, in my view, made it. As well as people that were striving to be successful and had high aspirations, and a strong work ethic to try to become successful themselves. And so, early on in our business, that's what I tried to surround myself with, because when things were challenging, I would have people to turn to that had either been there before or were going through very similar experiences that I was, and I could kind of share some of the trials and tribulations that we were dealing with. And then ultimately, over the years, I've gotten involved with various entrepreneurship organizations, and business ownership groups, where again I can learn from, and get ideas from other successful business owners, or people that are striving to become successful business owners. So I think that was very critical early on for us as well.
How many partners did you guys have when you started?
So when we first started, it was just myself and my business partner Omar Solomon, and actually to this day we have not brought on any new partners. We have started franchising our business, so we have 100 franchise owners in our system, independent franchise owners of our College Hunks brand. But as far as partners in the core business itself, it's still just Omar and me.
Was that a difficult decision when you guys started? Just the two of you? Were you guys thinking about, hey, maybe we need other people? How were those conversations with you guys? And I know it's 12 years since then, but I think it's important to kind of reflect back and say, hey, we made the right decision. Maybe we didn't. Should you have brought other people on? What were you thinking then?
Yeah, I mean, we at the very beginning, it was never really a question in our mind. We wanted to be the two sole owners. Over the years, we've considered bringing on partners. Matter of fact, we were actually on the very first episode of Shark Tank about 8 or 9 years ago, and we had an opportunity to partner with Robert Herjavec, one of the sharks, and we ended up turning it down. But to this day, we're still very grateful and pleased with our decision to remain the sole owners. I think the reason that people would bring on a partnership, outside of those that they start with, are for maybe two or three reasons. One would be financial reasons, if you needed the money. Two would be a strategic partner, maybe somebody that can help you get to where you're going faster, meaning they have connections, they have relationships, they can help grow the business, the sales in particular, more quickly than if you were going at it your own. And then three, maybe a partner that has a specific skill set, a subject matter expertise that is really critical to the business's growth. So, potentially, if there was an IT brain trust, if you're in an IT business or a development type business, it might, be worth considering having, some partnership shares. But you got to be very, in my view, very stingy with the equity you give out, because if the business grows, or if the partner that you start out with early on, isn't adding the value, in the future, then all of a sudden you're kind of stuck.
It's a marriage.
That's right. Absolutely.
I think
Absolutely. And I've been fortunate, I've been in business with somebody who was my best friend prior to getting into business. And, a lot of people will make the decision to go into business with their family or their friends. And it ends up not only hurting the business, but also their relationship ultimately suffers if the business fails, or if the partnership isn't, in complete alignment. So I think just like a marriage or any other partnership, the vision of the direction of where we're going, the values, our kind of shared values that we believe in, have to be in alignment. And then, we'll have bickering disagreements as to, the day-to-day stuff, but ultimately we get back to the plan and we get back to the long-term vision.
I think so many people want money because they think that's what they need the money for. And then they take it. And then a couple of weeks later, they get out of that honeymoon. They're like, oh man, I had no idea this is what that person was going to be like. And then they don't even know what they're going to do with the money. And I'm like, or they give a range. And I'm like, let's say I give you $100,000 check today. What would you do with it? I don't know. Well, then you don't need $100,000, right? I mean, so that's the challenge. So you're still in your senior year at Pomona when you started the business?
Yeah. Yep.
And so you go to corporate America for a little while. How long is a little while?
I would say it was about 6 months.
Okay.
I was kind of entering my 6th month in the corporate world, as I like to call it, and I was sitting in my cubicle, just really unfulfilled. I couldn't picture myself doing this for the next 20, 30, 40 years of my life. And I remember I was looking at the business plan on the shelf, and I emailed Omar. I said, hey, what's our timeline for starting this business on a full scale? He emailed me back, all capital letters, my timeline's right now, ! Let's do this. So, at that point, we decided we were just going to, pull the trigger and quit our jobs and start the business full scale. And like I said, there were some skeptics, but we used that as motivation to try to, keep pursuing our vision and to, make it more than just a local junk removal and ultimately moving business.
Sounds like you didn't need a lot of capital to start.
Our business, we were fortunate. We started with a shoestring budget. We grew it organically. What we needed was a truck, and we needed some flyers, and we needed, labor. So we were our own labor. I was driving the truck while Omar was, sitting passenger seat or vice versa. We got a bank loan, which, we were able to get our parents to help co-sign for the truck. And then we each had about maybe $5,000 in savings that we put towards the business. So everything from we were parking the trucks at our parents' house. We were still living in our parents' basement. Everything we did on day one was to try to reinvest back into the business. So eventually the business made some profit. We were able to get a second truck. Eventually it made some more profit. We were able to move out of our parents' house into an office. Eventually we made some more profit. We were able to hire our first employee. So we went about it, much more slowly, much more organically than a lot of entrepreneurs do. The nice thing about that is that we got to learn everything and the ins and outs of every aspect of the business because we were doing it all ourselves. The challenge was, we had to kind of be, again, patient to wait till the business was producing enough for us to be able to expand it.
Was there a percentage of the business that, from a profit standpoint, that you were trying to meet to then put into a savings account, knowing that you could then get to that next step?
At the time, no, there really should have been. There should have been. But what I've read since, and what I advise other entrepreneurs, and what we try to adhere to, even at the size of our business now, is you want to try to have at least 2 to 3 months of fixed expenses saved up in your bank account before you then look to reinvest into other expansion or other ventures. Because if that's kind of your runway, if all of a sudden the business deteriorates, or you hit a bad economy, or something happens, and you've got 2 to 3 months of fixed expenses saved up, then you can float the business and make adjustments during those 2 to 3 months to try to get it back on track. So that's what I wish we had adhered to. And in all honesty, we were more hand to mouth. We were running the business, generating some cash flow, reinvesting it back in, trying to expand. So we were doing it a little bit more ad hoc, which is probably how most entrepreneurs tend to do it.
Yeah, something that I've been saying a lot recently is if you look at businesses, and I think 50% fail within a year or two, and then I think like 90% fail within 10 years or something like that.
Yeah.
And then if you look at these people who go through these big business programs, and typically government-funded business programs are the things I'm talking about, if you were to correlate that and say that maybe these programs are built for are being built for the best case scenario, and not for the everyday business, you would see
Mm-hmm.
those numbers actually be increased. And so you see people laugh at you. You see people say, oh, you know, you're just hauling junk. Like, go back to your corporate job, do that. Like, if people would actually support that, if programs would be built towards what it's actually like bootstrapping a business, I think those numbers could actually increase, because they're not being built for the person that's well funded, that can just hire as many employees as you want, that has all the marketing stuff behind it. And you don't, there is something to be said for learning that type of stuff, right? And you said, because we had patience, because we played a longer game, we're able to really learn about the whole process. And what do you think about that whole kind of concept of that patience is important, but also the material that you receive, the education that you're getting is important, that you can have grit to it if you really think about it.
Yeah, and that's, you make a good point, because you always hear the debate, hey, can entrepreneurship be taught? Is it innate? And I think the technical aspects of running a business are very important. You got to have them to be able to be successful, but you also have to have some of those gritty elements of just grinding it through and making it through the hard times, and being able to ignore the negativity or naysayers in your circle, and those are things that probably those types of programs don't really educate about as much, but really I think they should be talked about, because there's a mental component to being a business owner just as much as there is a technical component, and the persistence, the patience, the grit, those things are very important, equally important, if not more so than managing your P&L and managing your people and that sort of thing. So you've got to kind of have both levers balanced out. And I think you're right that some of the entrepreneurship and business ownership training programs probably focus more on the technical side of things, and not as much on the the mental or sort of holistic side of business ownership.
What's the heaviest piece of, I don't know, machinery, furniture, whatever, that you've lifted yourself? When you're like, oh my, do you remember that time where you're like, I never want to lift this again?
Yeah, it's funny. It was probably one of our first or second jobs. We were still on the truck, and this was still when we had the beat up cargo van that we were borrowing from Omar's mom. It wasn't even, we hadn't even gotten our own truck yet. And we were moving these two large cast iron radiators up a flight of stairs, exterior stairs in Washington, D.C. And we didn't have any sort of mechanical dolly lift. We were literally having to kind of huck it from one step to the next. And we lost our grip, and the radiator actually rolled down the flight of steps and slammed into the side of the cargo van doors. So we dented the door. We actually still saved that door as like a trophy for prosperity. Now we have it kind of like in a little case in our office now. But that I still remember. And I remember when that happened, I was like, "What the heck am I doing? What are we doing? This is ridiculous. This is not what I went to college for." But we went on to the next job and kind of forgot about that and kept on going.
How did you know when to hire your first employee?
That's a pretty good question. I think when we started to burn out from doing all the work ourselves is when we read the E-Myth, and that was like the big light bulb moment for us, because it kind of lays out this trap that entrepreneurs tend to fall into, where you get stuck doing all the work yourselves and you start to burn out, and all the excitement and passion about why you got into business for the first place starts to kind of weigh in on you, or you forget about it, and you don't have that sort of personal professional freedom that you envisioned when you started the business. And so when we read that, we started documenting everything that we were doing and how we were doing it, and that gave us the ability to feel confident to be able to hire somebody to drive the truck, to talk to our customers, to load the truck as if we were the ones doing it. And of course, we made plenty of mistakes. We hired the wrong people. We didn't know how to train them properly. They didn't show up, or they showed up late. And we hired friends. We hired family members, and ultimately through trial and error, we just got better and better at it, and started realizing how to look for the right people, how to train them effectively. Because some of it is how you train them, and then the other part of it is just making sure you get the right people that can do what you need them to do. So it was probably 6 months into the business that we were able to actually hire our first set of employees and start working more on it and less doing the day-to-day work ourselves.
When you're hiring someone, I mean, you have a very physically demanding opportunity for someone. A lot of people probably don't want to do something like that. What type of process are you putting them through to kind of gauge that they're going to be a good fit from the training perspective, the right fit? Because from a management perspective, and you've done the work of lifting it up. You love the business, but you are in a management role, if you will. The people below you are not, and they don't see you lifting every day. So how do you kind of find those right people and keep them engaged?
Back then it was just a matter of, it was honestly as simple as, hey, can you lift this? Do you have a decent personality? Is this, can you handle this type of work? All right, go out there and make something happen. Now we've got much more sophisticated, systemized processes for doing those things. With us, it boils down to the will and the skill. The will is, do they want it? Do they get it? And do they have the capacity to do it? For what it is that we're expecting them to do. We try to determine that through the interview process, the questions that we ask, about their prior experiences, their prior work roles. Because in a lot of times in stocks or whatever, they'll tell you your past results don't produce, or past history doesn't produce the future results. But a lot of times in somebody's work history, you're going to see some signs or some patterns that are likely going to surface again in the future. So in their past, did they have certain successes? Did they have certain accomplishments that they can point to specifically and vocalize how they accomplished those? So we look for those types of things in terms of the will factor, and then the skill factor is, do they have the technical elements that are necessary to execute this business or to execute this role? So if it's one of the employees that we're hiring on the trucks, obviously they have to be technically able to lift the stuff and load it into the truck. They got to be technically able to drive the truck if we're hiring drivers. But more importantly for us, no matter what role, whether it's a frontline employee or a middle manager or an executive level, they've got to kind of align with our values. They've got to align with what it is that we're hiring them to do.
Tell me about the brand. So a bold brand. I appreciate that. I respect that. How did you guys come up with the name?
So originally, and I give credit to Omar's mom actually for this, we were sitting around the living room table when we were talking about using her cargo van, and she said, why don't you put on flyers, college hunks, we will haul your junk, kind of as a way to just, catch people's attention. And then we were laughing about it, and then we kind of looked at each other like, well, that's got kind of a catchy ring to it. So we shortened it. We said college hunks hauling junk. And, obviously we weren't very modest at the time. We said, we'll be the college hunks. We'll go do the heavy lifting. But what we realized was it was kind of, as you mentioned, a bold brand, a bold name, at least at the start. We didn't even have the brand at the time. It was a bold name, and it was kind of a pattern interrupt. It's not what people typically associated with moving or junk removal. It was kind of this fun, quirky, collegiate image that we were trying to portray, and not what people typically associated with, kind of a blue-collar business like moving or junk removal. So then when we graduated from college and we were starting the business full-time, we were looking for bright and recognizable colors. So we came up with the orange and green color scheme. And from there, the brand has somewhat evolved. People would always ask us, well, hey, are they all really hunks? And we didn't want to be just known for this kind of like, physical brawn image that people associate with hunks. So we actually came up with an acronym for hunks, which stands for honest, uniformed, nice, knowledgeable service. So it's more than just the brawn and the physical attributes, but it's also the mental elements, the service aptitude. So that's become part of our brand promise over the years. So it's been an evolution, but one of the books that also influenced us was Purple Cow by a guy named Seth Godin.
Yep.
And he says, hey, if you're driving down a country road and you see a big field of brown cows, you're going to keep driving because you've seen that before. You've seen it 100 times. If there's a purple cow in that field, you're going to pull over. You're going to take pictures of it. Nowadays, you'll put it on social media. You'll tell your friends and neighbors about it. And that's because it's remarkable. So you got to have a remarkable brand, but you also have to have, whether it's a product or service, a remarkable experience that is going to stand out for the end user, that is going to have them telling your story. So that's what we've always tried to do with College Hunks.
Very interesting. Omar was from Miami. Is that what you said?
So he went to University of Miami.
And there's no correlation to those colors?
So originally, I'll give it to you. Originally, I'll give you the honest answer. We were trying to figure out what colors to make the company. So we were looking at pro and college sports teams to figure out what color schemes really stood out, what color schemes were really kind of brand memorable. And we figured, since Omar won the business plan through the University of Miami's business plan competition, that there was some allegiance to the school there, but also for a relatively small private school, the University of Miami has a pretty recognizable sports brand.
Sure.
And so we figured, that those are bright orange and green colors. They stand out. People recognize them. So let's go with that, because that's what we're trying to be as a brand. Now we tell people a little bit more political answer. We say that the orange represents our fun and playful company culture. The green represents our environmentally friendly recycling and hauling practices, because of course not everybody likes the Miami Hurricane. So, but originally that did play into it.
Most people probably don't like the Miami Hurricanes.
Yeah.
I like bold choices. I like doing things crazy. You see the belts on the other side of me. We actually have a championship belt. It's kind of a piece of our brand. So things that we try and do is to be the champions of small businesses, and it's a bold kind of crazy thing, kind of like you guys are doing. And so I feel some of the stuff. We're not a 12-year-old business, but I appreciate that. Let's talk about the evolution to get into the franchise piece of this. When you guys opened, you were not anticipating on doing anything other than getting rid of your corporate career, it sounds like, and making some sort of living. Walk me through kind of the evolution of figuring out when that kind of thought of franchising, putting other people in different places into this came about.
Yeah. So we knew we didn't want to be we didn't want to be just a couple local guys slinging junk over our shoulders. We knew we wanted to be something bigger than that. And we had a bright orange and green truck. We had a flashy logo, and customers would actually ask us if we were a franchise. And we had never even heard of what that word meant. So we started doing some research. We were like, what are they even asking us when they're saying, "Are you guys a franchise?" And then a couple other people had told us that franchising, asked us if we were thinking about franchising our business to grow it. And so we did some research. We stumbled across the International Franchise Association and realized that that's a way for brands that are, small localized brands to expand their product or service into other markets without having to invest the capital in each of those markets themselves. And there's really three reasons that somebody would franchise a business as opposed to expanding it themselves. One, they don't have the capital to go and expand it themselves. Two, they would like to grow more quickly than it would take for them to go and open up the multiple locations themselves. Or three, they don't have the human capital, the management resources to go open it themselves. And we kind of lacked all three of those. We were, self-funded, so we didn't have a lot of money. We were kind of young and aggressive and visionary, so we wanted to grow quickly. And we really didn't have access to any sort of upper-level management talent to go and open up different locations. So franchising seemed like a logical step for us. So we started getting involved with the International Franchise Association. We went to some conferences, went to some meetings, met and learned from other franchisors. We ultimately decided that was going to be the path we would take to expand this brand into other markets.
What year was that?
That would have been in 2008. In 2008, we started franchising. We moved our headquarters down to Tampa, Florida, because the DC area was a high cost of living, high cost of labor, high cost of office space. Tampa had a lot lower cost of living and labor and office space, and we wanted a call center to be able to support the franchises that we anticipated opening. So 2008 is when we moved down to Tampa and started franchising. Then we kind of hit the economic recession in 2009, 2010, so that slowed our growth a little bit. We came out of there, a little bit more savvy and strategic because we, kind of forced us to be more savvy and strategic. And then ultimately we were able to, grow our franchise model over the past, close to 10 years now to over 100 franchisees.
Did you find yourself starting to surround yourself with those people that also owned franchises? So like before, you were people that are starting or visionary business owners. When you started thinking about doing the franchising, did those people start to trickle in and be the people you surround yourself with?
Oh yes, yeah, absolutely. I mean, with joining the International Franchise Association, we got access to, I met the founder of Subway, DeLuca, who actually passed away not too long ago. But he gave me a bunch of great advice, and he talked about when he first started. He told his wife that he wanted 500 stores, and she called him crazy. And when I met him, he was telling me this story. He had over 32,000 Subway stores around the world. So being able to surround myself with people like that, that had done it or were doing it, in particular in the franchise space, because it was like a whole new business for us. It was a new learning curve. We had never, we knew moving and junk removal, but we didn't know how to sell and support franchises. So being able to support ourselves with those individuals was critical.
How do you take advice from someone? Not like emotionally, but like how do you understand what they're saying and then be able to use it in your own business?
That's a good question. I think, for me, I always want to be open-minded and listen to what people have to say or what people have to suggest. And an example, I mentioned the founder of Subway, DeLuca. One of the pieces of advice he gave me was that, franchisors, when they sell their first, 12 to 24 franchises, they start over expanding and they run out of money. And he pretty much looked at me and said, "Don't do that. And so, I said, here's a guy that has 32,000 restaurants around the world. It would take him, 100 years to visit one restaurant every day, for the next 100 years. And so, for me, I was like, I got to listen to that. And I, kind of just plugged it in the back of my memory bank and said, I'll take that to heart. So I started, every financial decision we would make, I would start to look at it a little bit more closely to make sure that it wasn't going to, handicap the business. So, for me, taking advice or listening to advice or at least acknowledging it has always been critical. I've always been very open-minded of those things because I have never tried to purport to know everything or to know more than other people because, I think that can be one of those, fatal flaws for any business owner to not adhere to or pay attention to what other people have to say.
So listen to everyone, but maybe rank the people who have done it on super success. I mean, 32,000. I think they have over 40,000 franchises now, or
Yeah.
something like that. That's crazy. So the
Yeah. I
evolution.
mean, I know where the advice is coming from. I mean, it's nice to take advice, from my parents still and I trust their opinion, but they've never grown a business to the size that our business is. So, theirs is more of an opinion as opposed to wisdom. So that's actually another thing is to try to differentiate. Is somebody giving you advice based on experience, based on wisdom, or is it just kind of an opinion based on their own, thoughts or ideas? And being able to weigh those two, I think is critical.
That's a good way to say that. Opinion advice compared to wisdom advice. I think that's very critical. You don't go to your doctor and ask them an accounting question, but I think a lot of people from a business perspective are getting information because they watch Shark Tank. And so now they think that they can take that piece from it and learn from it. The evolution of you, Nick, has changed from, let's just call it a college hunk, to now figuring out, okay, I got to get customers. I'm a real business now. I have to open franchises. I need a lot of franchises. How have you matured into that position? And like from an emotional standpoint, what do you do to try and make sure that you're always, in a good emotional state, even though your world has completely changed over the last 12 years?
Yeah, one thing I try to do is I try to read a lot of books, and I try to apply the things that I learn into my business as well as my personal life. My wife gives me a hard time because she says all the self-help books that I've read, you think I wouldn't need any more help by now, or that I'd be able to follow the advice that's in them. But I think if I didn't read those, then I would be a lot further. I wouldn't be as further along as I am today. So some of the things that I've picked up along the way, for example, I read Tim Ferriss's book, The Tools of Titans, which he came out with recently, where he interviewed, similarly to the way you're interviewing me, a bunch of billionaires and artists and athletes and kind of just distilled their experiences and ideas into a book. And one of the things that they talk about in that book is kind of the morning ritual, the morning routine. And, a lot of the people they interviewed talked about meditation as a way to sort of, lower the stress levels, lower the anxiety levels that come and are associated with business ownership. So I do that. And that's, I think, helps mellow me out and temper the stress associated with, trying to juggle all the balls that are in the air as your business grows, as you're evolving in your role. As I mentioned, surrounding myself with business owners and other entrepreneurs and mentors. I joined the Entrepreneurs Organization. I joined the Young Presidents Organization, the Young Entrepreneurship Council. So those are some different groups where I'm surrounded by other people that are doing it or have done it, and that gives me a level of perspective where I can ask advice or seek input or ideas for situations that I'm dealing with that maybe I haven't dealt with yet, but somebody else has. So those are some of the things that I think have been allowed me to evolve and mature as the business has grown, so I don't fall behind. And then the last thing is recognizing, more recently at this stage of our business, is that I can finally afford to and be willing to hire people that are better at each one of their respective roles in our business than what I could do myself. And I learned that lesson kind of the hard way. Omar and I did a challenge where we challenged our call center agents to a sales contest where we wanted to see if we could beat them in bookings of our customers in an hour's time. And I think, or maybe 2 hours time. In 2 hours time, Omar and I combined had about 7 bookings, and one of the agents had over 14 bookings in those 2 hours. And it was kind of like an undercover boss type experience. I was like, okay, wow, like at every role in our company, we've got people and players in place that can do their job better than Omar or I could do it. And being able to kind of let go of the vine a little bit has been an important lesson for me as well. The business has kind of taken on a life of its own. It's more than just me or Omar pulling the levers anymore. And it's, the people within the organization that have made it what it is now and are going to continue to kind of make it where it's going to go from here on out.
You talked a little bit about your wife saying that you read too much and that you shouldn't need any more help. How do you manage the family life with the business? Do you tell your wife everything about the business? Are there certain things that you do and don't? How do you gauge with her in kind of the business, financial, emotional?
Yeah.
Pieces?
It's tough. Obviously, it does help to have somebody who's kind of an emotional support person, which she has been. I mean, she's been with us since we had probably 12 franchises, so she's kind of seen the evolution of the business and some of the different challenges that we've gone through. Dealt with some of the stresses and anxieties that I bring home from work. But I think what's nice is she's been able to recognize when I'm stressed out and when she needs to not ask too many questions. Like there might be something that happened at work, and I'm like, yeah, I just don't want to talk about it. But maybe I'll feel more comfortable talking to one of my business colleagues or one of my mentors about it because I know they've been there before, or they'll be able to kind of talk me through it a little bit better. But balance is always tough. I think I read an article recently by, I think it was Mark Zuckerberg's sister, Sheryl Sandberg, who said, family, business, fun, and I forget what the fourth one was, but it was like, and then fitness, physical health. And it was like you can only pick 3 out of the 4. So it was like you can't have balance. Like something is going to suffer if you're going to try to be great at all of them. I think that's roughly what it was. I think it was like family, fitness, fun, and business, and you had to pick 3 out of those 4 that you were going to be able to be great at. Because otherwise, if you try to do all 4, you're not going to be able to be excel in all 4, which is kind of tough to acknowledge. But I think there is some truth to that.
Sure. When you're in the franchising world, you're basically offering someone a playbook, a proven track record that this has worked in one place or multiple places, and we believe that it can work in another place. How do you put together that playbook and start documenting and understanding that the markets that you could go into will actually be receptive to the content that you're basically providing?
I mean, it's an evolution. I mean, even if you don't franchise your business, trying to document and systemize your business as effectively as possible so they can function without you, the founder, physically there, I think is the ultimate end goal. So it's been an evolution. It started with literally us just creating checklists on a computer or on a scratch pad of what we do every day and how we do it, so that we could have some consistency and repetition. So ultimately, we could teach somebody to do the same thing. And then as the business evolved, as we started actually selling franchises, we started getting feedback from the field, both the employees and the franchise owners, about what worked, what didn't. We started trying to document the best practices. We tried to start evolving those best practices. And even to this day, with 100 franchises in our system, one of our projects this year that our team is tackling is defining the College Hunks way of doing business, at all levels, at all layers. So even though we have that playbook and even though we have those processes, we're still trying to make it even more specific and consistent. Because during the first 100, some variation evolves with this franchise operating this way, this location operating that way, and we need to make sure that we document those variances and then kind of bring everything into alignment. So it's really just documentation and then engaging your team and everybody that is part of the business, so that it's not just coming from the top down, but it's also coming from the bottom up as to what the best ways of doing things are, and then evolving those and disseminating them out.
100 franchises, how many employees?
Corporately, we've got about 150 based here in Tampa, but franchise-wide, we have well over 1,000 employees franchise-wide, as part of the College Hunks brand.
What's your favorite tool to use to manage the business?
Let me think about that. So actually, one of my favorite tools, which I think is great for having a decentralized employee base, a decentralized, franchise ownership base. We use 2 that are actually kind of do the same thing, but are a little bit different. One is Yammer, and the other is Slack. Yeah. They're both apps. They're both, communication tools like message boards. Yammer is a little bit more like kind of an internal Facebook page or Facebook group where our franchise owners and employees can all communicate with each other. And then Slack is kind of like I would describe that more as like it's also a message board. But it's almost more like a reply all email with everybody in the organization, and it's got different subjects or channels that you can subscribe to or listen to, and that's been a really great way for us to communicate seamlessly, eliminate the silos in our organization. So I'm checking those regularly. I'm sending out communication to the system, and everybody's aware of what we're doing here at the headquarters. So those have been very effective tools for us.
Looking back on the 12 plus years in business, was there one decision that you made that went really well that you're super excited that you did, or the opposite way where you still have nightmares about?
It's funny. I get asked that question quite often, and it's hard for me to point to the mistakes because I try to just learn, or I should say, it's hard to say if there's anything I would do differently because I try to look at everything as like a learning experience that I would learn from and then evolve and improve on going forward. So an example of that would be when we first started franchising, we got locked into this service agreement with a third-party software company. And that kind of handicapped our growth for the first couple of years because we couldn't get out of the agreement. We kind of went down this customization with them, and it ultimately wasn't, a great software platform for us to use. But the lesson that I learned from that is just to, do more due diligence when making those types of decisions, to, leverage referrals more effectively. I think we kind of went into it a little bit blindly. And so because of that experience, I think we made better decisions along the way over the years going forward. As far as something that I would say was a huge decision that I'm happy about. We bought a building about 5 years into the business that we moved our headquarters into, which ended up being a phenomenal real estate investment because and it also was a great headquarters for our office. We grew out of it recently, so we were able to buy another building more recently in the past year, but hold on to the original building we had purchased, and now we're renting that out as landlords. So that I think was awesome because I had always had an interest in real estate, and having that opportunity, I think will help add to our our net worth over time.
What's your favorite book?
I know I've mentioned a few that I've read, but the one that's probably made the most recent impact in our business is a book called Traction by Gino Wickman, and it describes what they call the entrepreneurial operating system, or EOS.
Is that a light blue book cover?
No, it's a black and orange book cover.
What's the author again?
Gino Wickman is his name. The entrepreneurial operating system, and the book is called Traction.
Cool. Very cool. What did I miss?
The only other thing that I'll mention that we hadn't really talked a lot about is our company. Over the years, we've tried to adhere to the philosophies of Tony Hsieh from Zappos or Jim Collins from Good to Great, and so what we've done is we've really made our company purpose-driven and values-based, and I think that has allowed us to attract really passionate employees, really passionate franchise owners that care more about the company vision and the company purpose than just about making money. Of course, having profits in an organization is important. It's important to fuel the future of the business. It's important to create the lifestyle that you as the founder are looking to create. But in all honesty, it has allowed us to attract such talented individuals by having a purpose and a set of core values that we emphasize and talk about and reward and recognize people over. And so I think that's really critical that an entrepreneur going into business, that they think about those things and they talk about those things early on. Not just about growing the business.
In Good to Great, the main concept I took away is that they take one metric from every business and they make that one thing amazing and expand upon it. What's that metric for you?
For us, it's the client. It's the client experience. It's the client net promoter score. Because our business is a service business that's transactional. So it's not a subscription business. So our business grows based on the client experience, what I call the 3 R's: repeat business, referral business, and reputation online. And so if we get the client experience right, we're going to get referral, we're going to get reputation, and we're going to get repeat business. That's going to allow the business to grow. So that's the key metric for us. And I think we've been doing a good job with it. We actually measured our net promoter score and compared it to world-class companies like Amazon and Nordstrom and Costco, and we're right on the same plane as some of those companies. So everybody here in our company really gets it and focuses on that.
What do you do to kind of track that net promoter score or get the rating up? Because
Yeah.
the net promoter score is to track one kind of question in your business,
Yeah,
right?
the question is on a scale of 1 to 10, how likely would you be to use our service again or recommend us to a friend or neighbor? A 9 or a 10 is considered a promoter. A 7 or 8 is considered a neutral or passive, and then a 1 through 6 is considered a passive. I'm sorry, a detractor. And so we have a third-party platform we use called Listen 360. When we close out every single job, the clients get an email notification with that survey question. And if it's a 9 or 10, it says, "How did we delight you?" If it's a 7 or 8, it says, "How can we do better?" If it's a 1 through 6, it says, "How did we disappoint you?" And then we're able to follow up with the negatives, hopefully turn them into positives. But we're also able to follow up with the positives and turn them into more business, or ask them to share it online on Google or Facebook or Yelp or Angie's List and those sorts of things. So we really try to leverage those resources.
I think business owners, a lot of business owners, not all, or maybe not even a majority, do a bad job of taking that criticism and not being able to improve upon it. And so,
Right.
social media, social is the word. So if someone's liking or posting on your business channel or business page, you should probably like and respond to those type of things. And so as a business owner, when you hear positive and negative feedback, how do you take that information and try to improve upon it? Because if you're doing a bad job of something and someone's telling you, you have an opportunity to improve it. And if you're doing a
Hmm.
good job, you can double down on that, triple down on that. Who knows? So how do you work through that understanding when people are giving you positive and negative feedback?
It's funny because I'm emotional and I take things personally if I hear criticism, because I know how hard we're all working and how hard we're trying to make things right. So whether it's a franchisee or a customer that has a negative feedback to share, because by the way, our franchise owners are essentially our customers as well. Sometimes I do take it personally because I'm like, man, we're doing everything we can to get it right and to make it perfect. And how does this individual not see that? But at the end of the day, you have to remember, even if the customer is not always right, the customer is still the customer, and the customer is still the customer, even if they're not always right. So for us, it's just again kind of listening, being open minded, taking feedback, trying to identify ways that we can improve, and if it's just maybe a one time thing, maybe an employee messed up on a job, it's not a systematic thing. Then what can we do to improve this? The that employee's skill set. If it's a systematic thing that's going wrong, what can we do to improve the systems? And that's really the approach I think we have to have with
What's your favorite ride at Busch Gardens, Tampa?
it. Falcon's Fury is my favorite ride at Busch Gardens Tampa. It's the one that takes you straight up and drops you straight down. I think the free fall is fun. I'm not a big roller coaster guy.
Okay.
I get kind of motion sickness on the loop de loop, so I like the Falcon's Fury drop.
My crazy audacious goal is to be a majority owner of an amusement park one day. What's
Okay.
interesting, so we have a Busch Gardens up in my neck of the woods as well.
Yeah.
What's interesting about Falcon's Fury is the innovation on that is it's a drop tower, but
Hmm.
they take the seats and make them hang out a little bit so you can actually look down, which is an
Yes.
interesting feature. Innovation with an older ride is a pretty cool thing. What's next for you guys?
For us, we think we're going to grow next faster in the next 3 years than we did in the first 12. We feel like we've hit that inflection momentum point. So we want to make sure we focus and kind of continue to double down on what's working. Get to 200 franchise owners. Get to 150 million in system-wide revenue. That's kind of our next 3 to 5 year goal. Continue to be recognized as, or become recognized as, sort of this iconic brand from a service and culture perspective. And then from there is when I would look to maybe diversify into other business ventures, maybe invest in other concepts. You mentioned the franchise concept based in your market, Buzz Franchising. I think that has other home service businesses that they've lumped in, or kind of brought into their portfolio. I could see us doing that, but I don't want to do that at the expense of our core business that's still kind of in growth mode. So those would be, I guess, kind of the next two steps, I would say.
Yeah, don't diversify too quickly to then hurt the other brand.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely.
Nick, I appreciate your time. If people are looking to find you guys online, where can they find you?
Probably the best way would be our franchise website, collegehunksfranchise.com. That's collegehunksfranchise.com. They can learn about our franchise opportunities. They can also click a link to the consumer site if they actually need our services. But it has a lot of cool videos and articles and blog posts about our franchise owners and some of our business philosophies. So that'd probably be the best way.
Awesome, Nick. I really appreciate your time today and being on the show.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you guys so much for watching this episode of the 1004 show. It's episode 55. You just heard Nick Friedman talk a lot about his business venture and the growth of it. Talked about why maybe you should add a partner, why you should maybe franchise his favorite tools. This was a fun episode. I learned a lot myself. He talked about a lot of books to read, a lot of tools to use, a lot of things about advice and how to take it. Opinion advice versus wisdom advice. That's something that I've been trying to explain a lot to people. Right? You wouldn't talk to your doctor about an accounting question, so that's really opinion versus wisdom. So really strong stuff here. One of my favorite episodes with Nick. I think you guys can definitely learn a lot from it. So we're very appreciative for you listening to this episode of the 1004 show. If you guys like this, we'd love for you to share it with the people that you think could benefit from it. All you have to do is send them the link, post about it on the internet. You know, the internet, that very fun thing. Facebook, Twitter. If you guys have questions, email me, Zach, Z-A-C-K, at startwithhatch.com. I'm so appreciative of you guys listening. It really means the world. If there's a guest that you would like us to reach out to put on the show, let me know. Email me at that email, or we will try and get them on. And so we want this to be a beneficial opportunity for you guys to learn about ways to grow your business, start your business, get through the emotional side of business, or improve your community. So appreciate you guys listening. Zach Miller signing off, episode 55 of the 1004 show. Nick Friedman was great. You guys should definitely check them out, collegehunksfranchise.com. Peace.